Since the launch of Tears of the Kingdom last week, buried under the very deserved waves of overwhelming praise are some gremlins on Twitter and Reddit that seem to feel that the criticism of Redfall should also be thrown at Tears of the Kingdom regarding performance. And while they are in the vast minority, I have even seen some genuinely poor, confused souls making the claim that Redfall is in some way superior to Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not clickbaiting you. This is a real debate that real people are having, depending on if you want to count Reddit users as real people. While normally I don't entertain these Goku versus Naruto type arguments about games that aren't even in the same genre or on the same platforms, I am one of the few people on the planet right now unlucky enough to be qualified to properly settle the debate. I was one of the cursed creators that got sent a key for Redfall, and I played it off launch. I played it right up to the very last quest before the end of the game and would have beaten the game, except Redfall decided to stop using my graphics card at that point. As you can see here on your screen, that is 0% GPU usage. It was running the entire game off of my CPU and my RAM. I was determined to finish up to that point, but decided at the end of the day, the extra 30 minutes risking burning out my CPU wasn't worth beating Redfall and dropped it there. I have also been playing Tears of the Kingdom since launch, and boy howdy was I surprised that there was anyone brave enough to throw shade and in the same breath defend Redfall. There are absolutely valid criticisms to be made for both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and you aren't a bad person if you don't like those games. You are, however, a fucking idiot if you are perpetuating a bad faith argument that Redfall, in some fantasy land where the game actually fucking runs, is in any way, shape, or form even close to Tears of the Kingdom. I'm going to quote the phenomenal game reviewer ACG because frankly, I couldn't say it better myself. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is an amazing game despite resolution and 30 FPS. Redfall would not be an amazing game even if it were at 8K and 120 FPS. Beyond the fact that Redfall essentially did not run whatsoever for an extraordinary amount of the people playing it, the game is fundamentally soulless. And although it hurts to say because I have so much love for Dishonored and Prey 2017, Arcane is washed right now. Deathloop was plagued with issues that were covered up by its stylish presentation, and Redfall is one of the biggest heaping piles of shit I've played in my time on this planet. I beat fucking Balan Wonderworld, and I'm saying that. Let that sink in. So the question remains, why is it okay for Tears of the Kingdom to be low resolution and low frame rate, but Redfall is considered bad? Well, Junior, to start with, Tears of the Kingdom is basically running on a fancy calculator and still manages to hold more consistent overall frame rate than Redfall, which was available on PC, meaning the literal highest of high-end hardware, and Xbox. It barely runs on either of those options. Relativity matters when you make a comparison. I have a 3070, 10700K, and 32 gigs of RAM. I should be able to run basically any modern AAA title on at least high graphical settings and get 60 FPS on 1080p. To all the fucking chuds out there that ever respond to a huge flop of a title launch with loads of performance issues by subtweeting "runs fine for me," shut the fuck up, Jim Bob. Please, for the love of God, take into account that if you are running a fucking supercomputer and happen to only have a crash here and there, that you are not representative of the average consumer that is having issues, and that perhaps your experience is the outlier. A very large portion of the consumers playing Redfall are also going to be on console, meaning that your $4,000 graphics card is significantly more powerful than the system of the average person trying to play the game. I despise when people respond like that, because when the video essayists go back in 5 years to do their "what really happened with Redfall" video, they're gonna see these jackass comments and think it wasn't actually that bad. On the flip side, the reason that Tears of the Kingdom is getting away with being low resolution and only 30 FPS is because the product that you are consuming under those conditions is so goddamn impressive that the downside of low res and frame rate is outweighed for most of the people playing by how immersive, and here's a scary word, fun how fun the game is. Let's take a walk for a moment to a little horror game called Faith: The Unholy Trinity. Faith is modeled after the 8-bit graphics of old. It has minimal everything, to the point that the whole game is under a gigabyte. It's minimalist, to say the least, and yet it is easily one of the most impressive, immersive, and enjoyable horror game experiences I've ever had. Using the tools that you have to their fullest will always yield a better overall product than whatever is the most technically impressive next-gen looking game that has no clue how to curate a fun experience for the player. If you're good at picking up on foreshadowing, you might see where I'm going with this. Tears of the Kingdom has largely kept the development team together from Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Breath of the Wild. So there was not only continuity in universe, but an awareness of the limitations that the team was working with as far as the hardware goes. Now, I've seen people argue that Tears of the Kingdom is a reskin of Breath of the Wild, but that is horrendously reductive, and frankly ignoring that not only was the surface level completely and almost unrecognizably changed beyond a few landmarks, but there is a separate world in the sky and underground. Tears of the Kingdom is at least twice the size of Breath of the Wild at the end of the day, and Redfall isn't as brand new as you might think it is. You see, Redfall was supposed to be what Deathloop was supposed to be, which was an extension, the evolution of the goldmine Arcane found with Prey 2017 and Prey Mooncrash. Yes, they had to build the game and world from the ground up, but if you notice a lot of similarities in the concept and ideas of Redfall with Arcane's previous titles, that's not your imagination. Even though it is half-baked to hell and back, the bones of what used to be Arcane's signature design ideas are there, but there's no meat on these bones. And the fact of the matter is that every now and then, when they're not busy copyright striking content creators, Nintendo has to remind people that their games cannot be fucked with. And Tears of the Kingdom is genuinely a masterclass on what a full-price AAA game should be and what you should expect from it. Redfall is the sad reminder that most AAA games now are charging $70 for games that are outclassed in scope and quality by indie developers running on a tenth of the budget all the fucking time. Without spending an hour on it, I want to briefly compare the gameplay of Redfall and Tears of the Kingdom just in case there's someone typing up a small essay on how Redfall is actually super fun if it would just run. Here at the end of the tutorial in Tears of the Kingdom, you're told to do more shrines. There is a shrine in frame during the entire cutscene. When the character you're talking to moves and you're let out of the cutscene, there's another shrine in frame where they were standing. That's how curated this game is for the player. Redfall, on the other hand, can't even be bothered to place a mandatory quest where they mob you with enemies outside of the range of regular enemies, meaning that in order to complete this mandatory quest, you have to fight off the normal area enemies plus the event enemies, and it just becomes an absolute nightmare, especially when the frame rate is struggling to keep up with the combat that is supposed to be fast-paced. Now, you might be thinking, Jake, are these side quests carefully and methodically planned to interweave with the story and further the world building of Redfall, Massachusetts? No, they don't even have any dialogue or interesting information beyond possibly finding an audio log that you can't hear over the sounds of combat. And before I get someone in the comments saying how audio logs and text logs are great storytelling, no, they are not. They are lazy storytelling and should be strictly bonus content to be sought out by lore goblins, not the main method of storytelling. Redfall is so lazy in its storytelling that even the main questlines have barely any substance to them. I played for 10 hours and was a quest away from finishing Redfall before I quit, and I still couldn't tell you the general plot beats beyond spooky vampires and bad corporation made Redfall sad. There are some quests where you have to sit and listen to what amounts to an audio log that won't continue to play unless you are in the area. These go on for 2 to 3 minutes sometimes, and there's at least 10 of them that I had to interact with. These blue blobs you're looking at, those are characters that you're supposed to know. Go ahead and tell me which blob is which character. Even the introductory cutscenes for main story quests are indicative of how little Arcane gave a shit. Check this out. Instead of committing to writing out interesting characters and having character building interactions through the cutscenes and story beats, Redfall chooses to have quests introduced with a voiceover over the top of these static in-engine renderings, simply because it's cheaper. That's it. Paying an artist to have fun comic book pages for these bits would cost money, so instead they posed the character models in-game and had the camera pan across these still frames. I'm not going to waste my time or your time explaining how absurdly insulting it is to the players that the story is presented in this manner, so suffice it to say, the story is barely there and presented like the shittiest of student films. Even the character design, arguably one of the stronger elements in Redfall, suffers in some weird ass ways. I chose to play as Layla Ellison, a black female lead character, which are a dime a dozen even in modern times. She is the psychic of the group, and what crazy all-powerful psychic ability might her ultimate be, you might ask? She summons her ex-boyfriend to fight for her. What a great fucking message. With how little attention was paid to the other glaring faults in Redfall, I'm not even inclined to believe that it was never brought up, more so that they didn't have the budget to change things or they just didn't care. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. I don't have the time nor the patience to deep dive into the sinking ship that used to be Arcane Studios, but the reality is that Redfall failing should not have been a surprise to anyone. And if it wasn't a day one Game Pass title, it would have faded into obscurity, where only a select few would be trapped into buying it on sale for $20 in a year out of misplaced interest. In Tears of the Kingdom, there are a million ways to tackle even the smallest of challenges. And in Redfall, the game that comes from the immersive sim development team, there's rarely more than a few ways to tackle any given challenge, and most every solution to a problem is usually less effective than shooting whatever it is in the head. I do realize that I didn't spend a ton of time talking about how good Tears of the Kingdom is, but I don't think I really need to. It's most likely all over your feeds already, but I will end with this. The reason that Tears of the Kingdom is resonating with so many people, and the reason I was so genuinely annoyed by the comparison to Redfall, is that in Tears of the Kingdom, there is such a wide variety of quality content to tackle in almost any order you please and however you please. The game is not for everyone, but it's about as goddamn close to a masterpiece as I've ever seen. Comparing something with the time, effort, and polish put into it like Tears of the Kingdom with the orphaned child of a failing AAA studio is frankly insulting to the intelligence of anyone you might be telling that to. Redfall, on the other hand, is not fun under any circumstances. It is a chore to play in every sense of the word, and to be perfectly honest, if you disagree with that statement, I have trouble thinking you do anything in your free time besides eat Elmer's glue. Thanks for watching.